Welcome to another ThemeMountain video tutorial. This is part 3 of Project Grids, and in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to link a grid item to an image in a lightbox and a video. I'm also going to show you how to turn a grid item into an info box with some text and a shortcode button as an example. So if you watched part 1 and 2 of Project Grids, you know how we created this grid here, and you also know how we modified its layout. You'll also know how we created this test project here in the top left hand corner. So before I start here, I'm just going to go ahead and click this and show you that when clicked it normally brings you to the individual project page, and this is the expected behavior. So now instead what we're going to do when clicked, it's going to launch an image in the lightbox. So I'm going to go back to my test project. I'm going to scroll down to custom options for posts, switch to grids. Now here we have the image that we set in the grid. And I'm going to just go ahead and switch the link grid item option to lightbox. And I'm also going to go ahead and add a caption for the image as an example here. I'm going to go ahead and update that. Now if we click this image here in the top left hand corner, it will launch the grid image in a lightbox. And this is cool, this is exactly what we wanted to do. But if we zoom in on the image, we can see that it's actually quite fuzzy because we're using the same resolution image that we have in the grid. So what I'm going to show you now is how to add a high resolution image for the lightbox instead. I'm going to go down here in my project. I'm just going to switch to grids for reference, and I'm going to go ahead and set the featured image. And I'm going to find a higher resolution of the image that we're using in the grid. There we go. So I'm selecting an image that is 2500 by 1667 pixels. Now, obviously, since we're using source set here, WordPress will crop and serve the appropriate size depending on your resolution. So I'm going to go ahead and set that. And what this allows us to do is that we could set one image for the grid, in landscape for example, and then we could upload a high resolution portrait image for the lightbox if you so wanted to. And that's very useful that you do not have to show the same image in the grid as you do in the lightbox. So I've set my high resolution image. I'm just going to go ahead and update this, and I'm going to go ahead and reload the page. Now when I click this image, we see that it loaded the higher resolution image and it's crystal clear. So the next thing I'm going to show you now is how to launch a video from a grid item. So we're going to go back to our test project here, and we can leave the featured image as is, but this time what we're going to do is modify the featured media tab. So I'm going to go ahead and switch the custom page head title setting here to set it to custom for this post. And then I'm going to go ahead and scroll to the bottom of the options here and change the featured media type to video. So as you can see, you can choose Vimeo video, YouTube, and HTML5 video. I'm going to go ahead and select Vimeo as an example. Once you select your video, a few other options will appear, and such as the ID and whether the video should loop, whether the sound should be muted, and the video format. Now obviously the three last options here relate to the actual project page itself and not the lightbox. But what the lightbox does when it's linked to a grid, it basically pulls the featured media into the lightbox. So what I'm going to go ahead and do here is grab a Vimeo ID. I'm going to go back to my project page. I'm just going to paste it in here. And then I'm going to go ahead and update the project. And then we can reload the front end here. There we go. So we've linked our grid item to a Vimeo video that's launched in a lightbox. We've also added a caption here, and that can be seen below. Now, a few things to remember here is that if you create multiple grid items that are linked to different medias that launch in a lightbox, say an image, a video, and so on, all items in the grid will be associated with the same lightbox group. So this means that if you click one item in the grid, you can then cycle through all the media in the lightbox afterwards, if they are linked to a lightbox. So that's all for the lightbox part, and now I'm going to show you how to remove the image from the grid item and just create an info box with a shortcode button. So I'm going to go down here. I'm still under the grid tab here, and I'm going to change the link grid item to option again to not link this time. Then I'm going to go ahead and change the grid box appearance to show text with solid background. Now when I do this, we see that we get a few other options here. The grid background color, so this would set the grid box background color, so I'm going to go ahead and switch that. And as you'll notice, when I switch this, it will also change the background color of my editor down here. This is so that if I wanted white text, for example, I actually get the background color that I have of my box. The grid box title here we're not going to use. This is only used if you're creating a grid with a project title and then a grid description underneath. So we're going to leave that blank for the time being. Now I'm going to go ahead and add my text here. I'm just going to switch the text color to white. So we have our text here. Just going to drop to a new line and insert a shortcode button, an example. So as we can see here, we have a range of different options. This is the ThemeMountain shortcode editor. I suggest you try them out and play around with them. I'm not going to go through all the details of each ThemeMountain shortcode here right now. So I'm just going to fill this out. Just going to set a hashtag for the link URL. This I'm not going to change for the time being. I'm going to change the button here to a white button. Let's see here. And we can set the hover color to, let's say we can set it to red as an example. Right, so I have my button here. I'm just going to go ahead and insert it. Now, obviously, as you can see, we can change the color of this button as well should we want to, so that we can see it in the editor. But for the time being, I'm just going to leave it like that. So now that I've changed the grid box appearance, I have added my text and my shortcode button, I'm going to go ahead and update this project again. I'm going to go ahead and reload the front end here. And there we go, we've created a grid info box here with some text and a button. Now this is useful, for example, when you want to add a little description to the grid itself. Note though that if you're using a masonry grid like I'm doing here with fixed dimensions, if you add too much content, it will obviously be cropped, but you can turn the fixed dimensions options off and each grid item will scale to the content that's added to it. And that's pretty much all for this tutorial.